Today is May 2nd, Saturday, and I'm about ready to leave. The train should leave shortly for Cefalu, C-E-F-A-L-U, which is east of Palermo, to look at a cathedral and hopefully a Lavitoio Medievale, which is a medieval clothes washing place that women used. And here we go. I always like to be on a train or a plane or a bus when it starts up. It's like the beginning of the adventure. You're in the mini chute for that adventure, if you will. The way they're booking my air flight to some country. At that moment when I finally booked it, I'm in the chute and I'm going, period. Something catastrophic happened. The worldwide blight of overpopulation. This is La Rocha, and you can hike up to it, but we're working our way to the cathedral right now and decide on the hike later. Came here a couple of days ago. Her impression was that it was just overrun with tourists and was none of the old town ambience she hoped to find. But this is little fruit stands around, which is nice. People don't want the past to change, particularly independent travelers who prize the authentic and recognize it from the commercialized tourist environment. It's a pretty little square. There's the Roca up above. Quaintness that I perceive, I'm sure, will be overrun later today by the total emasculation of any ambience by the huge hordes of tourists. We'll see. Little stairways like this are always intriguing. Buongiorno. Continue on down this street. Tourists already, but these are probably the ones who stayed overnight. Drove in by car. Street reminds me of many streets in little towns on the Camino de Santiago. Narrow, high-walled towns designed to keep out the heat of day in that environment, and probably the same thing is true here. It's a pretty little attempt to make this stairway alley pretty. The Osterio Magno, I don't know if that means, I think it's this church right here. So it's about, what, 13th century to 14th century. You notice how part of it's been converted to residential and of course shops there. Up that street you saw before I started filming this, and a lady said something to me and she pointed to the church like, don't miss this, this is really the important thing. She was right. Architectural treatment of this building next to the church is interesting. Whether it was once part of the church, I'm guessing it probably was. Now apartments perhaps. This is the 1st century, I'm guessing that AC means AD. But this is something Roman. Now whether the roots of it are or whether the building is, I don't know. Just a large space, it seems to me, with some doorways, but maybe their offices and those doors there, so I don't really know what this is. Pretty entranceway with the hook that once held probably an impressive lantern, and all of the accoutrement on the side here has been wiped out. Here are the old doors. We'll just take a look inside here. I'm sure all converted to residences and There's businesses. That must be some of the original rock perhaps sticking out. Probably the center, what was once the inside here, might have been filled in, but on the other hand, the upstairs do look original. So it's possible all of this is, or part of it is, the lower part. Sa Battista Spinola. Now whether that means Spinoza, the philosopher, I think it was, I don't know, but this is the church. Interesting how they've incorporated that bell. And look at its old, what do you call it, a crossbeam of wood there. Still very original, it looks like. And what a pretty entrance staircase, too. No doubt to get it up higher onto perhaps some bedrock there. And this may be the remains of an old frontage. Window treatments, maybe the remnant of what might have been an expensive home at one time. Now converted probably to multiple units. Robust corner seems to speak of something in the past. Was this creche, I guess? Smelled something good. Some bakery. The remains of something. What exactly, I don't know. Beginning of something. I am using the travelers, vacationers, hypocritical prerogative of I'm on vacation. This was a union of some sort. Constituted or started in 1883. It is, and I've seen it before. It's a place where members from the union can always come and sometimes live and sometimes simply as their club, if you will. Of course, I'm disguised as not a tourist with my funny hat and my pants and my video camera. That's a wink wink. If I can get into the cathedral now and be done with that. Outside the main gate of the cathedral is this interesting building, which I'm sure is associated with the church. We'll go over and see if we can figure it out. I think it says Seminary Episcopal. And to the right of it, this other building, actually a church. But some older buildings, we'll get a better look at those, and then La Rocha behind it. Interesting frontage, probably, since it's all attached to the cathedral. Something to do with it. Who knows what. The inner courtyard might have even been functioning like a cloister before it was paved over for parking. Interesting to contemplate the lives of the thousands of people who walked up this route that is so undulating of brick, which is relatively new. Simple columns, heavily weathered over time. There it looks like something would have been like a cross or something like that over that gun slot. And here at least the attempt to show some kind of Gothic graceful arch structure. And here the facade covered up with screens to keep pigeons off of it. Here are the wooden ceilings, typical of some of these churches. Don't know the style, but same as the Palermo Cathedral in part. Interesting, so far that altar area kind of reminds me of Casa. Fundamentally, the rest of the church's design is pretty pragmatically basic, simple, unadorned. The column capitals were carved, but the walls at this stage are pretty much stucco, plain. Even the windows are not interesting. I wonder if they were once stained glass. Go up and take a look at a couple here, just to see if it's more than what it appears to be. It's very subtle, whatever. Frankly, it looks very modern, like it were some kind of plastic or glass modernistic, freeformed design. Sarcophaguses of important bishops that probably served out their lives here. Fitting tribute. Very strange window glass treatment. Before I pan up further, this column off to the right, a small column, I wonder if that's a remnant of perhaps an earlier church that stood on this space. You can see the altar area is looking much grander. Again, a rather plain design on that wall. There, an entire set of even smaller columns. We'll go look at that now. That picture of Christ very much like what we saw at Montreal. Notice in the upper right-hand corner a very tiny column used for that arched window. Pretty sure this is a little lapidarium in this church of prior architectural elements. Notice here some older capitals. Perhaps like the one, far one there was so totally weathered out they literally replaced them, and these are the old ones. Beautifully carved stone chalice of some sort. I get a closer view of the elements in the ceiling. I don't think those are mosaics. Pressing silver altar. Imagine the wealth it sucked out of the community. The organist just came in and put his music down, so we may hang around in the hopes that this is his practice morning. I want to look at the detail there. It's a very pretty contrast. I wonder if columns are painted. There's one little stained glass window in the right transept. Lower wall. But even it's curious. Small way this part of the church reminds me of Casa Professa. But really, in all fairness, it's only a reminder, but pleasant nevertheless. These are mosaic panel displays. But where they came from, a wall, a floor, I don't know. My guess is a floor. And there are several more to my right. Suggests there's a cloister somewhere, but where? Downstairs somewhere. Possible from my notes, it suggested that these walls were all covered with mosaics, that they were extensive, including a lot of the blank panels that we saw up in the altar section. How high and sharp and thick the stone is right here. But notice the rest, how it's all worn down. Think of the time it took to wear that down. This building on the right side of the cathedral was a wealthy person's home. cloister's where I walked before, I think, but maybe a different door. Here's where the cloister is, but it's closed, says it often is. So this notice says it's open from 10 to 1 p.m. It's about 10 minutes to 10, so I'll hang around, see if they open it up. Signs suggest it may be limited to Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. It appears that this building was not part of the cathedral. One I walked in and thought might be where there was a cloister. That's not the case. Apparently, it was just another major wealthy person's home. And this cloister, it's not as pretty, not as dramatic, and clearly not as complete as the Montreal. In fact, that entire side, this entire side, are gone, as well as what was once the colonnaded fountain area here, where you could perhaps sit and contemplate with the sound of running water. On the other hand, something they didn't have that I'd like to have was this explanation and chart of all of the work and the artists that did it. Now, I don't care to really be that detailed, but it would be interesting, and we'll try to do it, to see if we can find some of the ones that are of interest, like Adam and Eve, Noah's Ark, that sort of thing. Fortunately, where I'm standing right now is the same orientation as the chart. Notice in the fontana in the lower left, and here we are at our corner or quadrant. You can define that quadrant and the position of number 1 by where that little entry is, that step over there in the middle, which is to the right on the camera now. So we'll go over there right now and use the chart. Things I notice as I walk over here is that the capitals are heavily eroded. This one in particular, of course, is more than eroded, it's been broken off. This first one is Adam and Eve. Whether we'll be able to detect anything in there, I don't think so. Side looks like someone lying down, or almost lying down, and someone to the left, a woman. I can't make out there. To the right, maybe a man or a woman, naked. Here are the eagles, that's obvious. But it illustrates what I was thinking might be the case yesterday, that the capitals came in blocks like this, or similar to it, and then each artist hewn out what he wanted as a subject matter. You can guess this one. It's Noah's Ark. I didn't know he had 2 of them. Now, any woman will tell you can't trust sailors. Here it looks like he's constructing it in the right side panel. This may God illustrate God telling Noah to build the ark. This is the harpies and the ibis. Now, I thought an ibis was a Greek bird. Don't know what a harpy is. It's called the acrobats. And one of the ironies to this church is that I see very clear some similarities. I saw these acrobats at Montreal. Maybe this chart can help me identify some of those if I'm curious enough. It's called knotted acanthus, probably because the acanthus leaves are crossed. Of course, here all the rest of these are missing, which is quite sad. Probably destroyed before anybody realized the historical tourist value. The ones on the rest of this side are just acanthus leaves and variations of that. Ironically, or interestingly, each defined. Work our way through 60 to 54. This is the vintage and the deer, or whatever that refers to. The side of it. This is 55, the griffins and the crocodiles. Side must have been the crocodiles, and these are the griffins. Notice they're winged bird-like creatures with, I think, bird-like claws. Lion and the dolphins. If you can detect those, I'll go around to the other side. The cock is pretty easy. Those are wings at the top. They may be the griffin. The 12 through 25, which means that side over there, are dismantled, which means someday they perhaps will restore those and will help us fantasize what it was like before. The rest of it was missing. Exterior walls of the cloister, not much to see except that the remnants of where there were portals, presumably into other parts of those adjoining buildings. But most of those are filled in now. Okay, we're going to start down this street in hopes I can find Lavitoio Medievale. Also, it's a pretty little street to wander down. Nice and clean. Up in a hotel and asked the lady where it was. She told me it's pretty much at my second location I had deciphered it might be at. So we go down here, at the end of the street, turn left, and we'll be on our right a little ways. An old building that has not been restored. It's interesting because we can see timbers, old door casements, etc. Street, because if you look out off your balcony down this way, the shore and perhaps a beach invite you. Because I wander down here to see again how some people embellish where they live, make it pretty, even though it's just their one little spot on this planet and on this street, while others don't. They simply use it, at least the outside, for its utilitarian function. Who knows what they do with the insides. At the end of that street is a church, as well as this restaurant square, and it looks like some ruins back in there, so we'll explore this a little bit before we go to find the Lavatoio. These rocks, I'm reminded of some passages at the beginning of The Man Who Laughs by, I think, Victor Hugo, or Dumas Sr., where he describes a shipwreck, ultimately, and speaks of jagged rocks that can tear a boat apart. These are such rocks. This may have been some old fortress at one time to defend, if you will, the little port here of Cefalu. I'd have to go back in and read its history, but this is certainly picturesque, isn't it? And without the hordes of tourists. How cool is that? Sandy Beach, great tourist attraction and a wonderful attribute for the community. Now there's a place to live. Any one of those are here and coming more so, and disappears really fast. In the medieval day, women walked down these stairs. You can see those sloped rocks where they would scrub the clothing, if you will. That lady about ready to fall in and hurt herself. It flows down here and into these troughs right here. Whether that center portion, which has been carefully cut out, what it was used for, I don't know. Then more water dumping into here and into the individual basins, where you would then scrub using these rocks here, very much similar to the ladies who have their special rocks in a river. And that's why you don't wear sandals. She just rammed into his toe. Sandals are what people wear when they think they're cool. They have no idea what they're doing. And so here's where the sudsy water exits out into the Mediterranean. I wonder what these stones with the holes in it was. There something else here? Grotto pretty much being ignored, but I think it served a similar function. More water pouring out over there. And you notice how clear that water is. So very cool. With the help of a few local people, I have discovered the route up to the top of La Rocha. Here we go. Presumably up there is where we're going. Here, a pretty little spot, pretty little vignette next to the laundry with one of the original fountains, whatever original means. For €4, you get to climb up to the top of this rock. Good way to bring income and hopefully keep the trail in good condition. Another old fountain, not working, but indicating that it once did and served the people who were climbing to the top here. Pretty views. The sign here says that the layout of these fortified walls at the first entrance in the 11th to the 12th century AD forced the assailants to carry their shields on their left side, exposing their right side to the arrows, stones, and boiling oil of the defenders. Here, heavy steel net to stop the boulders that might come caroling off of that cliffside. And I wonder if that's a water runoff there, or part of a fortress. The entrance gate, wherever that is, was hidden. And I think they may mean by that it was done in such a way that you couldn't get a straight shot at it with a battering ram. So walls and the entrance probably up there somewhere. We'll see that in a few moments. But when you look at these walls, it seems pretty impregnable. However you pronounce that. You wonder if that was a roadway there, or if there also were defensive walls on that kind of plateau. But imagine the feeling of futility or challenge of having to climb up through this stuff. Back there somewhere, Palermo. Here's what they mean, is that with this thick wall here, by the time you got here, being hammered with arrows, stones, and boiling oil, even if you got a battering ram this far up, you couldn't back it up very far to do any damage. A walkway that soldiers defending the fort would have used. And you wonder if this sloped area here was where they brought the boiling oil down and then just poured it off here. And it would have trapped the soldiers right in this area who were trying to invade the entranceway. And all of this area were filled with either defensive battlements or perhaps even building structures. Probably this area in here was filled in so that there was a walkway up that wall, and then that was also a walkway to get you up into that next level. And who knows what was in here. Obviously walls here, so probably some kind of structures up above those walls that may have acted as a barrier to hold in the hillside. Maybe remnants of the flooring or paving in some of the rooms. This, although these could have been of later origin. Notice that thin line of what looks like broken pottery, probably evidencing what was original versus what was a restored wall. In English down below is only in Spanish up here. Like most buildings that range back in time, they've been modified dramatically over time. And perhaps the jail. Down there looks like the classic cloister, but I don't think it is. It may have been though. Secondary wall that surrounded the entire top, except for the areas where there were sheer drop-offs. Remember Normandy and the Americans, folks. And we may still see evidence of the old gate here. Interestingly enough, there was a tomb nearby with a person of short stature but no grave goods. I don't know if this was that tomb. This looks more like it was designed as a cistern, too big just to be a tomb. You can see where the wall continues to that drop off and then another wall up above. I'm going to the left where the sign says the archaeological area. Drawings of the old cistern from the 6th to the 9th century AD, the Byzantium period, against the Muslim assaults. 19 cisterns were developed for protection in sieges. From a natural cavity, it was waterproof with mortar and covered with a brick barrel vault. Large internal steps slowed down the flow of water and kept it clear. A pulley anchored on a beam was used to draw up the water. Pretty deep. I can't see them. I guess maybe there's the bottom. This was pretty large. Although, of course, it could never be large enough since you didn't know how long the siege would last. And you had as many men up here as you could get. One of the troughs that moved water into that cistern. Probably there are several of those kinds of things all around these slopes and these walls, but they might have had little cubby holes in there for storage or whatever. All space is normally used on a hilltop like this, where you've got as many soldiers as you can pack in, and you need to feed them in a siege. Is that any slope that could be modified to hold buildings did. Pretty little copse of flowers on this slope. Another cistern, perhaps. Notice that the stone's been worked, but also plastered. This level, you can see the remaining structure, as well as those areas that were added and restored. That building using the outer fortification wall is one of its walls. What it illustrates here is after the fall of the Roman Empire, maybe 250, 300 AD, moving up farther than that to the 6th or 7th century, I think. But anyway, it says here that during the 13th to the on this interpretive sign, from the 12th to the 13th century AD, there were 3 bread ovens, a series of warehouses to store grain and other foodstuffs, because the entire population of Cefalu moved up here for its protection. And this would be one of those ovens. Huh. Boy, you can just imagine when this was cranking. And town was busy. So hard to imagine. Someday you'll be able to. Church of St. Anna, 9th to 10th century AD. To keep you aware of where we're going, we're moving further into the archaeological site. And here to investigate first. Structures and the remnants of structures all over this slope. So don't think you were looking at a pretty little park up here in those days. This was a compact, intentionally overbuilt area. There's sizable structure. We'll go back up there in a few minutes. Almost Greek polygonal design. We're going to go down and look at, it is referred to as the crenellated wall area. This area, this wall, overlies a cliff of about 150 meters, which puts it at almost 430 feet. Also found here near the trail was the skeleton of an Islamic man, soldier, who had died a violent death and was buried there, according to Islamic rites. It might have been one of the battlement platforms that had a catapult on it, perhaps for lobbing big stones against the big ships that would bring in the soldiers. What I didn't see is that area down there with all the columns. So I have to go back down and roam in there to see that. Down in there is the cathedral, and to the right is that cloister. That other place that looks like it should have been a cloister was that expensive home, and there's the square. And here's the drop-off. No need to build a really substantial wall here, you would think. Wow. Another view of this vertical face. Wow. Notice how they've used strapping right there to hold those rocks in place because they look like they're ready to come loose. Interesting. One thing I've always admired is the magnificent locations that fortresses and cathedrals and monasteries are often built on. Here another cistern, and if I get off of it, you can see that there was some kind of vaulted space leading from it or to it, don't know. The 5th to 6th century BC Temple of Diana. Refers to a dolmen type cistern, which may have been what we looked at, from the 9th to the indicates the sacred use of this building. And those being sacred waters. Prime lookout position, and there are the remains of a small Byzantium church dedicated to Saint Venera. Again, suggesting the sacredness of this spot. The dolmen type cistern, whatever that means. A dolmen may refer to this rock, what looks like a column, perhaps holding up these big stones. Okay, here we are, the column, the stones. That being a dolmen, meaning simply a rock monument of some sort, but I've never seen that term used in connection with a well. It's an impressive entranceway, and look at the size of that one stone. And there are several stones that are large. The one in that corner is large. And notice how there's been a great attempt to modify the stones to fit carefully into its neighbor. Very Inca-like. Nicely, these corners were worked to be square and somewhat perfectly aligned. And another massive stone. Wow. Into the temple, an entrance to the left, and an entrance to the temple itself here. Notice the vaulted ceiling at that end. And a couple of side chambers. Maybe they were just windows. Maybe there was water coming through there. Looks like perhaps the main part of the church. That rounded portion usually indicates the location of the altar. And you can see that it was dome-like at the top. There's one of those pretty green lizards. Not the first human being he's seen. He's sitting upright, wondering what I'm going to do next. This might be the entrance, but it's not. There's I can tell. Although there's an interesting hole carved right there. Would make sense if there were stairways, but it's not grand enough to be an opening, I can imagine. Again, notice the massive stones used. And all the way up the slope, I'm sure, we can see support walls, walls supporting terraces perhaps. Those all would have been layered with homes and business structures and streets of some sort, probably running parallel across the grade, if you will. That we're over another vaulted room, but we didn't see into that room. Notice these big stones. 1, 2, 3 very large ones. Maybe that's a fourth very large one. Maybe that's the dolmen also concept. But how you entered this temple is a darn good question, at least this portion here. See how it's narrower at the bottom than it is at the top, going straight up and leaning almost to the right, perhaps to give some support to that dome that was being in the process of arched forward to the left. Is the entrance here. Vaulted right here with the extra height of that wall. Does that mean there was an extra level above this vaulting? Thought I was near the top, but no such luck. The castle's up there behind that tree. is the biggest cistern I've seen so far. Having come up right there, I think I'm now at the fortress. So we'll climb a little bit higher where those folks are and take a look, and maybe wander down these battlements. Point of no return, the last resort. Can you imagine the soldiers that were up here, that maybe lived up here once in a while while they were on duty, debating amongst themselves as to the probability they wouldn't be attacked by, I don't know, Muslims, pirates, who knows what all, Normans. Great views. They're sheep or something, find this an ideal place to hang out. I'm at the corner of these ramparts. I'll give us a good view from here. This is what the soldiers would have seen. Notice we can see walls ranging about there. Probably came back along here somewhere, tied in down there when we came in. One of the places we came in, I think, to this upper level right down there. Just for your information, is tucked further around the side there, dead in front of us.